I loved playing outside and being outside in the woods. And I heard somebody walk up. Well, I thought it was my grandmother, but when I looked up, it wasn't. It was a young male Bigfoot. And he walked up close enough to me that I really got a good look at him. He got a good look at me too. We stared at each other for a little while, and he just turned around and walked off.
Well, we're glad we got to talk to you tonight. We appreciate you coming on with us.
Well, thank you for asking. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. It was funny. We were kind of talking a little bit on social media, and I didn't realize that you were who you were. Uh, you were actually on a Flash of Beauty Paranormal Bigfoot documentary.
Yes,
You
on
know
both
that
of them. There are two of them.
on both of them. You were in the first
Yeah,
one as well. Okay.
yeah,
Um, and we just interviewed Rick Taylor
yes,
not too long ago, actually. So it's kind of weird that you
yeah,
fell into that realm because you guys had that connection. But
yeah.
for those listeners that don't know about you, yeah, you were on those documentaries, and you've had a lifelong experiences of Bigfoot encounters and activity. But I know it started at an early age. How old were you when this happened? When this first started going on?
Actually, the first encounter that I remembered as an encounter was when I was 6. So I have 7 decades of knowing about them. Almost. I'll be 76 here in a couple of months. So it's been a long time, but even before that, there was an incident happened that my mom and I talked about, and I was sitting on her bed talking to a Bigfoot as he was looking through the window. So I was talking to him before at age 6, but I didn't remember it as this is a Bigfoot. And, the term Bigfoot wasn't even coined at the time. It happened long after my encounter. Um, and the picture I shared with you of my grandmother demonstrating how the Bigfoot walked was sometime in the early 50s, very early 50s. She couldn't remember when exactly. She had given me several photos that she had had for years. I'd never seen that photo until probably, oh gosh, in the 90s, early 90s, I guess. And she went in the nursing home and gave me a bunch of pictures, and that one was in it. And I said, "Well, Gran," I said, "what are you doing in this picture?" And she kind of looked at me and grinned, and she said, "I was doing the walk." So she, and I was like, "I've never seen this picture." But that was so much fun too, to be able to see her. And in that photo, she's just grinning. Um, but then she had her own encounters growing up in the Boston Mountains in Arkansas. So she knew.
Yeah, Brian, I just sent that to you that Arla had messaged me, so you can check that out and maybe put it on the video as we're going through this. So you can start from the beginning with your mother and the encounters, and then go from there, and just
Okay,
take
I
it
can
take
do
it as
that.
long as you want. We're just here to listen. So
Okay.
have at it. Okay, Arla?
Uh, all right.
Start from where you want to, and then just go with it. So
Okay. Well, at 6, I was at my grandmother's. I was sitting in the dirt outside playing with sticks and flowers and rocks, and I was always making something um, in the dirt. I loved playing outside and being outside in the woods. And I heard somebody walk up. Well, I thought it was my grandmother, but when I looked up, it wasn't. It was a young male Bigfoot. And he walked up close enough to me that I really got a good look at him. He got a good look at me too. And it's funny because I knew it was a boy, when he walked up. And we stared at each other for a little while, and he just turned around and walked off. Well, I jumped up and ran in and told my grandmother what I'd seen. And I said, Granny, what was that? And she said, what do you think it was? And she let me think about it for a while. And then she started answering my questions and teaching me about them. Um, the incident that happened when I was 3 was an incident I remembered from the time it happened, not because I was talking to a Bigfoot that was outside the window, but because of the situation. I was sitting on mom's bed. Dad was taking a bath, and mom was getting clothes out of the closet for the next day. And she heard me talking, which I talked to everything as a little girl. It didn't make any difference what it was. If I was in the woods, I was talking to trees and grass and squirrels and butterflies and anything else, and complete strangers. So, um, it was just part of what I did. But she come out of the closet and to see, who I was talking to. And she looked at the window and she screamed for my dad. She said, Arla's talking to a nasty, dirty man that's looking in the window. And of course, dad tore out of the bathroom and went through the kitchen and got a butcher knife and went out the door to see, who was out there. So that was the incident. I remembered it, dad with a butcher knife and all of that. But, you know, so mother and I were talking a few years ago, not too long before she passed. And she said, Arla, do you remember when you were 3 and, said where we lived and at that happened, that, and she goes through the whole story. And I said, yeah, mom, I remember that. I remember daddy going out the door with a big butcher knife. And she said, Arla, dirty, hairy man, do you think I saw a Bigfoot? And I said, well, mom, what do you think? And she said, I saw a Bigfoot. And so basically, dirty, hairy man is how I've heard a lot of people, describe them. And if you're only seeing, from the chest, part of the chest up, um, that would definitely be a good description of some of them. So as I grew, um, I was in the woods and, they would be around. And my grandmother told me there are neighbors. And as our neighbors, we are to be respectful. That sometimes you talk to your neighbors and sometimes you don't. You don't bother them. And so, what she told me, I never went about to purposely go out and bother them, as she said. But that didn't make any difference. They still, came around me. In 2009, it was impressed upon me that I would be sharing about what I had learned through my life with them. And I would be doing that to something that I didn't know existed, which was the Bigfoot research world. I said, that's crazy. Why are people trying to prove something that a lot of people already know, exist? And I thought, they were teasing me. And no, they weren't teasing me. So I began to speak and share, my experiences over the years. I was actually given the name of the Immaculate Mother of Wu because I talked about that paranormal side. That now this is, 16 years ago, and this whole community has changed um, for a big part. Some, still are having trouble with that, and that's okay. I can understand that too. But I just began to tell my stories, and people would hear me. And I went to this podcast and then to that podcast. And the interesting thing was, some of those podcasts, they were not pro paranormal at all. So I made it a decision not to ever look in the chats because it could get pretty rough in there sometimes. Um, like with Rick Taylor, who had his encounter with the family that I've interacted with for years. One in particular, a young male that I call Indigo. And, I have my reasons for calling him Indigo. No, it's not his name, but it doesn't bother him that, I call him Indigo. In this family, there is a dad. I call him Owl Caller. And if you've heard Rick's tape, he has a video of the encounter that he had. It doesn't say everything, but you do hear Owl Caller in that, and you hear Rick talking about what it is he's seeing. Um, so I have Al Caller, who is the dad. The mom, I call her Moma, and it's because when I've heard her singing to the baby, she says Moma, Moma. And then there is an older daughter that I call Meridia. And then there's Indigo. There is Blue, who is younger than Indigo. And then there is a one I call Baby Girl, who is the youngest. Now, Rick saw every one of these plus another one. Um, a lot of people, have seen Indigo, friends and different people. So it's interesting that I've had a lot of years with them. I've got to watch those hairy kids, is what I call them, grow up, and they are pranksters. They have pranked me to no end. Um, I was gonna put my little, what I called, a one woman and a dog tent. It was just a little bitty tent. I had a bull mastiff, and she would sleep in the tent with me. And I was gonna put it up just overnight. And so I hiked back in where I put my tent up. And when I was putting it up, I was behind it. The poles had weren't attached anymore. The cord had broken. So I always counted my sections to know I had exactly enough for that side and then exactly enough for the other side. Well, while I was behind the tent, bent over, staking it down where I had put those poles in, I heard some movement scurrying around, and I just thought that's probably a squirrel or something. And so I just come back around the tent, got my other poles, I put them in the other side, and I went around to the back and I went, wait a minute, there's something wrong here. And I was a pole short, so my tent was not setting right. And I thought, I know, I counted those poles. I know I did. So I thought, well, I've got tent parts. I keep old tent parts and stuff. And I hiked back to the house, got a piece that I thought I could make work. It wasn't exact, but I figured I could make it work. So I took it back and I think I duct taped part of it and then went ahead and staked the tent. Well, after I had gotten everything done, I decided that I would sit there on the ridge and just look out over the ridge and kind of just chilling out. And something caught my eye in a tree that was in front of me. It wasn't a huge tree, but it was tall enough. And I looked up in it, and there was the other part to the poles that I couldn't find. So while I was around behind the tent the first time staking that down, somebody came and picked up one of those poles and stuck it up in that tree. Now, to my knowledge, squirrels don't take metal poles up in a tree. So I just said to him, okay, guys, I know you're here, and just talking to them. So those things have happened, and I can tell story after story after story about things that, have happened.
Can you describe to us what these creatures look like?
Well, I've seen, of course, the group that, I've interacted with. Um, I know very well. I've also had other encounters. I've backpacked and hiked and primitive camped across the United States and into British Columbia, a big part of the time by myself with my dog. I've had several encounters. I've had encounters here in Oklahoma down in the Comanche Mountains. Um, so they do have some differences in how they look. The ones that I'm around, and I do have photos. No, they are not 100%, but they're enough. When I took those photos, I wasn't out to take pictures of them. I was just out taking pictures of birds and everything. And I knew Indigo was there. I didn't think he would be in the photo, uh, but he was. And and then Blue, there were 5 of us that were back on the ridge. We had hiked back in, and we were sitting on some big rocks. And one of the girls looked off over to the edge of the ridge where it kind of went off. And looking up over the ridge was Blue. And the reason I call him Blue is because he's so dark that when the sun would hit him, it would kind of look a blue look. And so that's why I call him Blue. one of the other girls, I picked up my camera and I said, okay, I'm going to take a picture. You know, they knew what I was doing, but I always tell them that out of respect for them. And, you know, I tell them, you can be in it if you want to, but you don't have to. You know, I'm just taking pictures. And so my camera had gone dead and I'd taken pictures just a little before that. And I was like, well, okay. Well, one of the girls said, um, I wonder if I can take a picture of him. And I said, you know, again, and she said too, okay, we're going to take a picture. And where he was at in a moment, he could have just dug down the side of that ridge and you would have never seen him, but he didn't. And there were 5 of us that saw him in the daylight. It wasn't at night, it was in the daylight. Um, so, you know, my purpose in all this has not to be been to prove that they exist. That's not what I do. What I came into this for was to help people who were having encounters and didn't understand, you know, what was going on. You know, and I'm afraid this happened, and I think that he was trying to break into my house. If he wanted in your house, he would be in your house. You know, that's the truth of the matter. I've camped with a lot of people and they were like, I'm getting in my tent. And it's like, if they want in your tent, I mean, they're going to be in your tent. But if you don't understand their nature, sure, it could seem, you know, aggressive for sure. I've got a story I tell about this young man. I was camping with a bunch of guys down in the Comish Mountains, and he and I had talked during the day about them. And he said, you know, I don't really know what they are. And I'm not sure they won't hurt me. And so, you know, I just talked to him about what, you know, what I had experienced. Well, later that night, we were all sitting around the campfire and it was about midnight. And as I do frequently, I just get up from the campfire and walk off into the woods. And I had walked down the road. It was like a little 1 lane road to get back in where we were. And he stood up and he said, Miss Arla, can I go with you? And I said, sure, come on, go with me. So as we were walking down the road and talking, we began to hear uh, bipedal footsteps, heavy bipedal footsteps coming towards us. And where we were, it's, you know, you can't hardly see in from the road. There are cedars and pine and other things. So we hear him. And if you're ever that close to them, you will feel them for the most part if they want you to. I mean, they can be right beside you and you'd never know that they were there. So he's coming closer to us and stops just right inside the tree line where there were some cedars. And the young man grabbed my arm and he said, are you afraid? And I said, no, I'm not afraid. Are you afraid? And he grabbed it and got up closer to me and he said, yes, I don't know what he's going to do to me. So if you had the reports on that encounter, mine would be we're walking down the road, we hear heavy bipedal footsteps coming towards us, they stop. Um, and that's mine. His was, he was scared, really bad scared because he thought he was going to be harmed. but he already said that during the day. He already had his mind thinking about what they were, which he said he didn't know, and he didn't know if they would hurt him. So, your mind and where you're at, for the most part, is going to be how your encounter is. If you're afraid, then you have something that you feel close to you, that a lot of times you can literally hear them breathe, that, and you don't know, but you know it's really big, and you don't understand how you're going to be afraid, and you're going to think it's aggressive. I tell people all the time, yes, they are loud, and they're big, and they're hairy, and they look a lot like us. And, if you can get past your fear, which is what Rick did in that, he went through some things that helped him, even though he was a little concerned about what was going on. And of course, I was his shield. And I've been that for a lot of people through the years. They're like, they won't do anything to me if you go with me. So I can't say that's true, but at least, I'm going to be respectful of them. I've, I'm 75, will be 76 here pretty quick. I have never ever had a bad encounter, but I was taught about them. My grandmother talked to me, so, and she said, they're like us in ways, but they're not like us in ways. And if you have respect between you, there'll be no problems. And so, that's been one of the things that I've tried to help people with through the years, is to let go, of the fear. But that fear, it stops everything. It negates things that happen with you. I was at another camp out down in the mountains, and there was a lot going on. I mean, there was whistles and whoops and all kinds of noises that our people have assigned to them. And we were way back in, and a couple of the guys were in the back of a pickup, and we were going down this one road. And one of the guys got a very good look at one. He even went back to the cabin and drew it out and talked about it. By the time we left the next day, he had talked himself out of seeing this. He just couldn't wrap his mind around what he had seen. So, I understand. I do. I've been out, oh gosh, probably with hundreds of people over the last 16 years. And some can do it and some can't. And I always tell people, if you're out in the woods and you think they're there, you get this feeling, then talk to them. Tell them who you are. Tell them why you're there. Um, if you can't get past that fear, don't push. Turn around and leave. It's just that simple. Um, so, you're going to have to shift your paradigm if you're going to see more than a footprint or structure, or hear what they call a tree knock, or any of those things that you see. If you shift your paradigm, then this whole world opens up to you.
Very awesome, Arla. Uh, what do you think these creatures? I mean, I know that Rick talked about the mind speak thing on the
Mhm.
show. Episode 241 actually was what he was on not too long ago, um, and dealing with that. And but you've been with this your whole life. Tell us what your interpretation of these creatures are, and where do they come from?
Well, that's where we really get into owning the name that they gave me a long time ago. Um, from what I know, they came here to this earth. They didn't evolve on this earth. They came here to this earth um, with a purpose. And there are many tribal elders that will talk about this purpose that they have here on this earth. But then again, I believe that we came from somewhere else too. And if you want to call that the heavens or whatever, we came here at a specific time. Um, as my grandmother said, they're like us in ways and they're not like us in ways. Now, I have what is called an ancient male. I call him Kashima. That is his name that he gave me. He is what a lot of people call a teacher. I don't know if you've heard that term before, but what they do is they work with a human. Well, when I talked about that, people were very upset with that and saying I was making up this teacher thing and, I wanted all the attention. I can guarantee you most of the attention I got, I did not want, you know. So, but he has taught me so many things about us, basically. And one of the things that he told me was do not put your thoughts as a human onto how we should be. And we do that with everything. The term is anthropomorphize. We want to make everything human. We do it with our pets uh, and different things. And so we want anything that we're going to interact with on a higher level, I guess, to be like us, to be human. It's hard to think, oh my gosh, there's something out there that basically is smarter than we are and a lot bigger than we are. And yet, they're not out there trying to take over the world. I had a man I worked with one time who had started having some interaction. And he told me one day, he said, well, I know what they're doing. And I said, okay. And he said, they're amassing numbers. And I asked him, I said, why are they amassing numbers? Because they're going to take over the earth and do away with all the humans, and I'm going to help them. Now, you could say, well, that man's crazy. But what he did was he took the situation and made it the reality that he wanted. He had always had a problem with people. He felt like people wouldn't let him do what he wanted to do. He had been reprimanded, had lost jobs, all kinds of things because of how he acted. And so he took that and he made that into what he wanted as his reality. And the truth is, he believed it. He really believed that. And humans do that all the time. They have a belief about something. And so that shapes their reality of life, how they function in life. So, it's who you are and how you are when you're in the woods has a lot to do with what happens while you're out there having an encounter.
I believe that. I believe that totally. It's what you really feel, and that kind of opens up things to me. Like Brian and I have been out in the woods a lot of times, and you know nothing really is going on, right? But maybe sometimes if we try to connect with them in a different level, like you said, I believe that we were put here, not how people really think we were, um, and so were other creatures and other things. So who knows? It's hard to say, and it's hard for people to grasp that whole concept.
Yes,
It
it
really
is.
is.
Yes, it is.
But we don't really know. No one really knows. You can say,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah, I have my reality too. People say, well, you got your reality too. And I said, yes, I do. I have my reality from what I grew up with, the interactions I've had my whole life. Yes, that is my reality. I can't say to you, they were going to hurt me. I've had fear of them because I've not experienced that. And with just down to believing that they exist, whether you think they're flesh and blood or more, um, if you don't believe that, and then something happens to make you question that belief that they don't exist, then you start asking yourself, okay, what else do I believe that's not real? Am I believing something that's not the truth? And that's a scary place to be when you start questioning the beliefs that you hold and being wrong about them.
so do you think these creatures come and go out of different realms? Are they here the whole time?
I was just going to ask that.
Sorry, Brian.
They are interdimensional, but we are too. Most of humanity has just forgotten and pushed away that ability to do so many things. We can do everything that is attributed to them. We just have to remember how and shift our paradigm that that's a possibility. And, when you do that, oh my gosh, this whole world, opens up to you. I've never had a problem growing up because I wasn't told you can't believe that. Now, my mom, I think I was really a hard child for her. I tried to run off all the time. I think the first time I ran off, I was like two. And so I was really hard, you know, for her. But when I was four, I would dream about people. I didn't know these people, but in the dream, I would know them and I would know their name. And then later, I would be in a situation where I saw this person. Well, that freaked my mom smooth out when I did that. And I remember the last time I told her anything about it. Now, I talked to my grandmother about it all the time, but we were at a movie theater and it was intermission. And, people used to at intermission would all go out into the lobby and get something to eat or drink and visit because they were smaller theaters and you knew most everybody that came. Well, that time, um, mom was visiting with somebody and I broke away from her. I saw somebody and I ran over there to him and I looked up at him and I said, "Hi." And I called him by his name and he said, "Do I know you? Who are you?" And then my mom heard and she ran over there and grabbed me and said, "Oh, she's just she doesn't know," and, and took me away from that. And she told me, "Don't you ever do that again." And so I didn't with her. But like I said, my grandmother, I could say anything to her about what I saw, anything. So I wasn't, just shut down and said, "Well, you can't do that." So, but it's an interesting life when you shift your paradigm and you go out and you've shifted that paradigm. Okay, I don't know if anything's going to happen or not, but I'm going to go out and I'm going to sit here and I'm going to be respectful in my thoughts with what I'm doing. And if I feel like they're around, maybe I'll say something to them. A lot of people, when they're out, get that feeling I'm being watched or I feel something. And the easiest thing to do is, like I said, just talk. And, I have people say, "Well, do you just talk telepathy?" No, I talk out loud a big part of the time. That's just what I do. Um, and when you get something, if you get something back, don't negate it. Just let it be what it is. And, you can think about it after a while. Like with Rick, he wasn't for sure about that whole what they call mind speak thing. And he just fell right into it. I mean, they asked him a question that nobody there knew. I didn't know he had a gun. If I'd known he had a gun, I would have asked him to leave it in his vehicle, not because I was concerned about, the Bigfoot. I would have just done it because I don't want anyone carrying a gun when they're here on my property. Um, and I mean, if you're over the ridges and, everything else, I would just rather you did not have a gun. And actually, I've had people I asked to leave because they said, "Well, I'm not leaving my gun." Well, okay, this is how it is, and it really doesn't have anything to do with the Bigfoot, but has to do with how I feel. And I'm not against guns either. I don't want you to think that, because it's not the gun that does it, it's the person that does it. So
Yeah, and I don't think you're gonna really. I don't think a gun's gonna matter against a Bigfoot unless
it's
you have like
not.
a cannon.
No.
But I mean, the whole thing about them knowing that and that whole concept. I mean, like you said, that they're not from this world, or they have capabilities. What do you think about the whole cloaking thing? Is that something that you've run into as well, or
Oh boy, that's a good question. And I'll tell you my story on cloaking. And yes, I've seen them do it. I've got one picture that was taken probably in 2010 of one I called the old white one. And I didn't think he was there. I was on the ridge taking pictures. And when I took the photo, he was in what I call transition. He was just into that. You can see through him, but you can see the outline of him as well. But I told you about Kashima. Um, and a lot of my interaction with Kashima has been in the physical and not just telepathy. Um, so one day we were walking and I was asking him questions about different things. And we came up on a flock of wild turkeys. And if anybody knows anything about wild turkeys, if they get a sense you're there, they're gone. So we came up that way. They knew we were there and they scattered. And so we continued on walking. And then when we were walking back, the turkeys had started to filter back in that area. And I looked at Kashima and I said, "Can you hide me?" And what I meant was, "Can you cloak me? Can you make me where I can't be seen?" And it was a split second, and I was hidden. The way I know I was hidden is we walked on towards those turkeys. I might have been, I don't know, 20 feet from one, had no clue I was there. No clue. Now I'm touching my body, and I'm like, I'm feeling myself. I don't feel different, and I'm looking at Kashima. He looks totally physical to me. There is no distortion there. But the one thing that was different was my feet weren't touching the ground, they were above the ground. So, I'm there looking at that turkey and I'm going, "Oh my gosh, he can't see me. He can't see me. He's right there, and they can't see me." And so we walked on past and walked down another way where we would walk. And as we were coming back, he did something to show me um, how it kind of changes. I mean, you can do this in increments. I mean, he put me in that space immediately. But when I came back out of that space, we were walking and I felt the difference then. And it was like the turkeys' heads went up, like they were sensing something. We walked a little further, and I mean, they were on point to take off a little further, and they were gone. I was there back on the ground walking. If it had not been for the turkeys, would I have really known that that was going on? That'd be hard to say. If I would now, I would have realized that I wasn't touching the ground. Um, but having those turkeys there, um, just showed to me that yes, I was hidden. Were there any bad side effects from that? No, there weren't. What happens? Your vibrational body changes, but that doesn't mean that you look different to yourself. I mean, we're talking quantum energetics here. And for anyone who studied about quantum energy and the entanglement and all the things that go with that, it's like that's not physically possible. Well, it is physically possible. The first time I told that story on a podcast, oh my goodness, I just kept earning all these little patches to go on my name, the Immaculate Mother of Woo. So, but all I could do was share my experience. I can't share an experience truthfully that I didn't have. And, if people want to think, I'm crazy, I don't have a problem with that. I was probably crazy before crazy was cool. So, it doesn't affect me at all what they say about me. One of the interesting things with Rick, again, was there used to be a thing on the internet, and right now I can't remember what it was. It was a forum, and you could go and post questions. And it was well known that if you posted anything outside of flesh and blood, or you had a face on face encounter, it didn't get nice. And there was no one who, kept up with what people were saying. Well, after that uh, encounter Rick had, he shared it on this forum. They were, oh my gosh, they were eating him alive, literally. And I'd always, said, I'll never go on there. There's no reason for me to be there anyway. And so I'm just not going to do it. Well, Rick called me and he said, "Could you do something for me?" And I said, "What is it?" And he said, "Would you come on there and talk to him?" And I was like, "Oh, Rick, I don't know that I can do that or not." I said, "I got to think about this." And so I did. And the next day I told him, I said, "Okay, I will go on that forum, and I'll answer questions. If people have questions, I'll answer them." Well, that thread ended up being 10,000 and something comments on that thread. That thread was taken down after all of it. But there were two guys on there that, oh my gosh, they were out to, I guess, get me. I don't know. But I was never disrespectful to anybody that asked me a question, nor, made fun of my answer or me. And I had them say all kinds of things, to me and about me. But I was never disrespectful to them. I was just sharing, what I could share. And after it was over, two of the guys messaged me and told me, and it was the two that were really hard on me and Rick. And they told me, they said, if I was ever going to believe anyone who said the stories like you do, it would be you, because of how respectful you were to everybody. You were not disrespectful to anyone. You answered questions. Um, and of course, it was that big if that they put in there. But, I appreciated them, telling me that, because it was, oh my gosh, poor Rick. He, he was just crushed because, this wonderful thing had happened to him. And now all these people are, coming at him. So,
What forum was that, Todd? Do you remember that one? You heard of that one?
Bigfoot something. I can't remember it right now. Um, I don't remember. I don't think it was a Yahoo forum. There were a lot of Yahoo forums back then. Um,
Now, I'm not sure. There's more non-believers of Bigfoot than there are anti-Christian people. You know what I'm saying out there?
I know.
There's more people that don't believe in Bigfoot than
Yeah.
than don't believe in God, which
That's ridiculous.
it's crazy. And there's haters out there, but you did the right thing, Arla. Just
yeah.
being yourself and ignoring the crap and the assholes. And I'll say it, they were
Yep.
assholes. But uh, we really appreciate you being on the show with us. We
Yeah,
want
we do.
definitely want to
That was
bring you back
amazing.
on
All
and
righty.
talk
I'd
about.
like
I know
that.
you got way more to talk about. I do have one more question for you though before
Okay.
we let you go. If someone wants to see a Bigfoot, what's the best way to go about it? Let's say they're in a good area, where there's a lot of
Mhm.
woods, Michigan, or
Ohio,
Ohio, Pennsylvania, Pacific
Oklahoma.
Northwest. Uh,
Oklahoma.
There's
no,
a lot in southeastern Oklahoma. The locals would always say there's more Bigfoot down here than there is people.
okay.
So,
So
Wow.
no cell phones, no guns. I mean, what's your best opportunity here?
go to the woods in a respectful way. Go enjoy the woods for, the first thing. I mean, how awesome is it to get to go out,
The beauty
sit
of the
around a
woods. Yeah.
fire,
Mhm.
just enjoy yourself and shift your paradigm. You know, uh, don't say, well, this can't happen to me. You know, I'm not sure about all of this. Just go. Open yourself up. Like I said, if you think they're around, talk to them. Tell them who you are, why you're there. Um, and don't do things that you wouldn't want have done around you. It's
Yeah,
that
that makes
simple.
sense. Hmm.
Number one, they love to see us have fun. You get, a bunch of people sitting around the fire, talking, enjoying themselves. The majority of the time, somebody's out there watching what's going on. Kids, they say, oh, they like kids. Yeah, they like to watch kids because kids are always having fun. They're joking and playing and laughing and enjoying, what it is that you're doing. I mean, here in Oklahoma at outdoor powwows, I've got Native friends who put plates of food out for them at the powwow as a gift to them. Um, and they talked about they could see them just inside the tree line watching as the drums being played and the dancers are dancing and kids are running around. uh, they enjoy that a lot. um, is something going to happen the first time you go out? I can't say that. I don't. I'm not in the business of making things happen. I'm just in the business of letting the flow, be what it is. But it is that simple. I've got a lot of people who are friends now that I worked with for a little bit to get them to shift their paradigm. And oh my gosh, their life opened up. Keith Bearden's one. He just shifted his paradigm, and oh my gosh, things started happening. Um, you can take your cell phone if you feel like you need to have a cell phone with you. Um, I take mine and I get out there and put some music on and I sing and dance, and I've even been laughed at by the hairy kids because of what I was doing. Um, Enjoy yourself, and respect's a big thing. Most people don't want to be around somebody who's disrespectful. That's a hard place to be. And if you don't have anything happen that time, you got to sit in the woods, and that's an awesome thing to be able to do.
Yeah, that is true. It is
Yeah, you're
beautiful out
right.
there.
And shifting your paradigm
Hmm.
is what people need to do. And being positive is the right thing,
Yep.
right? So
Yep. Another little quick thing that you can do, because they're very good at camouflage. But most people either look down or straight ahead. Now, a lot of times you're going to have to look up if you're looking through trees and things. Just scan. They know what you're doing, but you can tell them, I'm just, looking through here. And yes, I'd like to see you, but, if I don't, I don't. And I don't know how many people who I've been out with and they start doing that and they go, huh, what's that dark shadow thing out the side of that tree? Is that another tree or a stump or whatever? And they just noted it and then just, went on looking across the horizon or whatever. Then when they come back, they're like, that's not there. That shadow's not there now. And they're talking, well, that's got to be 8 foot up, 7, 8 foot up on that tree, and then they go measure and they go, oh my gosh, what did I see? Well, that's pretty evident what you saw. Even though you didn't get a clear view, you did see something.
Well, Arla, we want to thank you again so much for being on the show with us tonight. It was awesome talking to you, and we definitely have to bring you back on down the road.
I'd like that.
For sure.
Yep,
it was a great time. And then again, thank you so much for being here with us. So
you're welcome.
I'm sure you're going to have a lot more going on next time we talk to you. And
looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, thanks so much for all your knowledge as well tonight.
Yes.
You're very welcome. I appreciate you guys.
Appreciate you too.
Thank you. We appreciate you. Thank you.
All right. You take care. We'll talk to you soon.
I will. Bye.
All right,
Thanks.